Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jacob Steele, Events Manager for Banyen Books and Sound. Today, we're delighted to be hosting Erica Buenaflor discussing the book Animal Medicine, Curanderismo Guide to Shapeshifting, Journeying, and Connecting with Animal Allies. Erica Buenaflor, M.A.J.D., has a master's degree in religious studies with a focus on Mesoamerican shamanism from the University of California at Riverside. A practicing curandera for over 20 years, descended from a long line of grandmother curanderas, she has studied with curanderos in Mexico, Peru, and Los Angeles, and gives presentations on curandismo in many settings, including at UCLA. She is the author of Cleansing Rites of Curandismo Soul Retrieval, and Sacred Energies of the Sun and Moon. And today she will be talking about her new book, Animal Medicine, a Curanderismo Guide to Shapeshifting, Journeying, and Connecting with Animal Allies. To learn more about her work, you can visit www.realizeyourbliss.com. Erica Buenaflor, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jacob. Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you. So why don't we begin with the foundational question, what is Curandismo?
So Curanderismo, at its essence, is a Latin American shamanic healing practice. And its roots are grounded in the practices of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. And then, over hundreds of years, it's become a very eclectic practice, but its roots are with the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
And so what is your background in training in these practices?
So my background in training, my background as a curandera, it's still very much predominant in a lot of Latinx families, especially first generation, where we have some kind of practices that our aunts or grandmothers passed on, whether it was working with herbs, and healing. So I grew up with that. I was 5 years old when I first did what's known as the first limpia, a sweep limpia. I did it with a battery instead of a feather or anything like that, but I already was I knew how to do. It was just, I knew what I was this is something that I knew. It was definitely in my roots, in my blood, and something that I saw. So I grew up around that. And then when I came to live in the States, it was a little bit of a culture shock in the States, because when I came at the time, people weren't so open yet to speaking different languages. The predominant norm was you were American, so you spoke English and that's it. So it was a little bit of a disassociation growing up for a while, at least, especially just when I came. And it still is for it hasn't gotten 100% better, but there's a lot more immersion in terms of Spanish and culture and acceptance of that. So it wasn't until, my exposure to it, culturally was it was my aunts, my uncles, my grandmothers, but there was definitely a break a disassociation with that when I came to the States, right? Because it was like, it wasn't something that you were proud to be of. You weren't proud to have indigenous anything and not Mexican, or so it was like a like double stigma, right? And this is important in all this too, because a lot of us as practitioners, when we're reclaiming these things, and we're healing a lot of these, colonization. We're decolonizing our spirits, our souls. So that's still very common for a lot of us, and this is important to bring up. So, my practice, and it was being interwoven with academic. When I got to college, it just woke me up. It was so amazing, like learning how cool like my indigenous ancestors, their practices, and I just like, oh my God, my ancestors were amazing. So it was such a huge shift. That was such a huge shift in my psyche and my consciousness. It was something that was in my heart, but it wasn't something that was expressed or exposed about, or talked about, discussed about. So when I got to college, I had an opportunity. I had some really cool professors that let me basically create my own independent studies, and study what was going on with economic globalization, what was happening locally too with curanderismo practices, and how they were being passed down or not being passed down. So I was doing those studies, and so I was studying it academically for a while. And during that time, it was at the time, it was like early 90s. So in California, what was happening, there was a governor by the name of Pete Wilson who passed all these very racist, I'll just say it was racist, just racist laws, preventing, it was attacking a lot of the Latinx community. And he woke up a sleeping dragon, you know, he woke up a sleeping dragon. So we came out just in protest. It was huge. It was like this whole thing, just like protests all over again. And then at UCLA, the school that I was at, there was actually a few years before I got there, there was actually a hunger strike. So we can have our own Chicanic studies department and study about our cultures and actually get a degree in that. And we actually had to protest for this. The university wasn't willing or allowing us to do this, to have a degree in this. So, I mean, this is huge. Now it's much more common, but like when I was in the thick of it, it was very much ingrained in social justice. So my spiritual awakening was very much I guess you could say intertwined with social justice issues, and then, so it was still that curanderismo and studying, it was very much in my heart, but I decided to go to law school, because I thought I was like very idealistic. I want to change the world. And, it was that. And then my second year of law school, I had a very interesting thing happen. We missed my friend and I, we were going to be going to Cancun, the Yucatan, and we missed our flight. And I ended up sitting next to this very interesting gentleman who began telling me about, he knew curanderos, he knew, and they did healing work, and, he had a place there in Tulum, and he got my attention. I was like, wait, curanderos? Like, he's like, yeah, I know them, and they give great limpias, and I just had my attention. He's like, so you're going to be going to Cancun? I was like, yeah. He's like, you guys are going to like it. I said, well, okay. He's like, come visit me. And I said, well, we'll see. So he wrote down his address. He put it down like on a little map. So we got to Cancun, and it was okay, but we wanted something that felt more authentic, like being by the beach and like talking to the people, being in the culture. And we went there, and sure enough, that's when I met one of my first mentors, Don Tomas. And it was amazing. And I remember after my limpia, he gave me a limpia, he gave me, a baño, like he had me do like this cleanse with flowers and herbs and cleanse myself. Then he wrapped me up, and it was transformational. I mean, I felt the shift, the energetic shift immediately. And I felt like I was like, oh, this is this is my practice. This is me. So, afterwards we had what's known as a plática, and pláticas are heart straightening talks. They're like when you're releasing energy and talking. And he's like, so, who are you? What are you doing? And I told him, I said, oh, I'm going to law school. I'm going to be an attorney. And he looked at me, he started laughing. And he's like, you're not going to like it. You're a curandera. Because I told him my great great grandmother was also a very well-known curandera. So that was in my family. It was like a distant past, but it was definitely there. And I told him about that. He's like, you're curandera like your great great grandmother. And I looked at him and I said, okay, yeah, that's fine, but I'm going to law school. I just kind of like dismissed it, right? But after that, when I got back to LA, I actually planned my next trip 4 months later. And that happened for about 7 years. And I just kept going back. And then I also met in that time too another mentor, Barbara, who was a sobadera. And that's basically working with like acupressure points and doing energy work with the body and releasing traumas that are stuck in the body. And she taught me all of these things. And then Don Tomas began also continue training me during that time too. So at that time, 7 years later, I was already an attorney, but I was living two lives, very separate lives. I was teaching classes too. I was taking different kinds of, you name it, but I didn't yet identify myself as a curandera too, because that was also something that I was healing in my psyche too, from just different things that I saw growing up and, what have you, right? So, what really turned it for me was the catalyst was I was hiking and I slipped. I fell off a cliff. I woke up being airlifted and I had a skull fracture, a brain hemorrhage, left AC dislocated, 2 vertebrae in my back fractured. I completely shattered my coccyx. Left leg, I fractured in 3 places, right leg, knee down, all of my bone shattered and came out of my heel. You're like, oh my God. I was really stubborn. They say that we choose things before things happen to us. And I guess I chose it because like, I'm really stubborn. I need something really big. So, at that time when they told me everything that was wrong, I had made the decision to stop doubting myself. I had made the decision because I knew who I was. I know who I am. Like I knew it, but I just kept like, oh no, but I'm an attorney. Somehow I'm going to make it work and I'll do it this way. And I don't know why I'm doing this. I just was constantly dismissing, what was in my heart, and trying to find it was just like, oh, this is just like something that I like to do. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I continue doing it. So at that time, I just basically proclaimed, and Spanish is called the don. It's a healing gift from God. And I proclaimed mine. I said, I totally recognize it. I have no doubt this is who I am, because I knew if I didn't do that, I was going to be handicapped the rest of my life. And, long story short, I worked in that time, I was in a wheelchair for almost a year, but during that time, I utilized everything that I had been taught. And long story short, after not walking for almost a year, after my last surgery, I walked with a completely normal gait in less than 2 weeks. And I had lots of other things happen. I had osteomyelitis where I lost half the bones of my ankle, you name it. But I used herbs, I used acupressure points, I used breath work, I used all those things that I had been learning. I used working with the sun, soul energy from the sun, which is known as tonali. So I used all those things, and that was my full-time job, and it worked. It worked, but like the universe I put myself through all that because I needed to like shift out of that, right? And I remember during that time that I didn't doubt that I was going to be, I knew I was going to be 100% okay. I had no doubt in my mind. I remember one time the doctors came in and, they began telling me like, they was giving me like dire diagnoses, like, oh, this is going to happen. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to be in pain the rest of your life. And I would just turn to them and I say, so doctor, when can I begin doing my yoga again? And they would just like get frustrated and walk away. And I knew in my heart I was going to be okay, 100% okay. And, during that time, I think the only time I cried, I think maybe 2 or 3 times. The only times I ever cried was thinking that I have to go back to work as an attorney. Because I was doing good work, but it just wasn't, I felt like I was working within a box, just a box. Like, this is what I could do for people. This is all I can do. I can get them money, but there was like deep soul healing that I knew that I wanted to help facilitate with. So, I when I healed, I knew I had to take time out, continue to take time out to figure things out. So I actually went back to grad school to just, and also because it was one of those things that my father, he was the first one to go to college. My mom, she struggled so much. She like totally just broke all stigmas, came to the United States, learned how to speak English in college. There were times where she didn't know she was going to feed us, like, and took me to school with her. So I would like study with her so she can go to college. So it was like my family was expecting me, like, you're going to go to college, you're going to be a professional, so it's like that me saying that I was going to be a curandera was like not happening. But they're just like, no, that just, I would mention it like, oh, so what about this? And they'd like, it was like they'd shift it. It was like, no, no, so I thought to myself, like, go to grad school. And it was a good thing though, because I thought maybe I'll be a professor and I can get grants and I can study these things and write about them and, like find a way to do it that made my family happy, made everybody happy, And that was another healing journey too for me. Because I got there and I mean, it was beautiful because at that time I got access to all the codices that you can't really get in a lot of places, like other than at a university, because you get like all the private libraries that you can order them. So basically that I was doing, I'd go to school and I brought like a traveling like briefcase, like one of the rolling things, and I'd load it with like 40 books, and I'd go home and that's what I would do, just read, get back in my roots and study. And I remember crying sometimes reading these things because I knew that that's what I had been doing. And I knew where it came from. I knew that that was like, these are my traditions. Like my soul pieces were coming back. All these wonderful things were coming back to my heart. And, it was something that eventually I began, after I decided it's like, I didn't want to study curanderas. I am the curandera. It's like, I'm like, no, I'm going to, so that was a transition. It was a process. But eventually that's how I got here. So my practice comes from, and also during that time, I actually studied under 4 mentors. 2 of them were from the Yucatan and they spoke Yucatec Mayan and they spoke Spanish. So they were very versed in Mayan traditions and Yucatec Mayan traditions. And the thing about the Maya too, and especially in that region, that they held on to their indigenous practice, like they're very proud of them, very proud of them. And they'll talk to you and they'll teach you Yucatec Mayan. They're like really sweet people. So they're very welcome and they teach a lot of this because they want to maintain that. And then I had 2 other mentors that identified with those traditions and also identified themselves known as Nahuatl, which is generally associated with indigenous traditions in central Mexico. That's like the Zapotec, the Aztec, central Mexico. So it's a little bit north, so it's basically like indigenous tradition. So a lot of it is grounded in practice and academia in the indigenous traditions of the Americas, like in Mesoamerica specifically. So that's a lot of what I write about. That's how I practice. That's how I teach. And that is what is in my heart.
Well, I think it's quite extraordinary the way that like you are a practitioner of this, and at the same time you've really delved into the history and the study of it, and you have you at the university, so you have both of those to bring, and you've written this book, the animal medicine. One question: what prompted your? Well, actually, before that question, what could you give a sort of a picture of the book, like sort of an overview of what you were doing with it, what you were saying?
Absolutely. So I wanted to give, it's broken up into 2 parts, right? So the first part talks about how to develop connections, with our, and I use it as a general because there's so many different terms, and I said animal guides because even in indigenous traditions, there's so many different relationships with working with guides and animals. And yeah, there's a lot with that. So I said animal guides encompasses everything. So, and then in some instances I make a nuance. So I discuss like the first part is how to begin connecting with them and journeying with what are known in shamanic traditions and Curanderismo traditions as the non-ordinary realms. Because there's a lot of medicine in these non-ordinary realms, and we can also do soul retrieval, we can do healing work, get messages. So we work with them in the non-ordinary realms. And then the second part talks about working with them in a way that, not the way that Western sees shapeshifting, but in the way that indigenous people still see shapeshifting. Some, because some it's like, that they're like, if you do shapeshifting, you're a bad bruja, you're a bad witch. You must be dangerous. It's like, but those are like colonial kind of like mindset. But like the indigenous, they know that it's really to help raise energy, to do healing practices, it's to revitalize our energy. And sometimes it's important because it's healthy ways of releasing and allowing ourselves to get in touch with our primal instinct. So it's shapeshifting energetically, physically, astral, and being able to see, like talking about that, like all the, because those are practiced. Those are practiced. It wasn't just physical shapeshifting, and those are talked about in the codices, two different ways of doing that. And I bring that in that, and I suggest that too. It's like, these are beautiful gifts, especially for people that have anger issues or aren't able to speak out, are reserved, or our general empaths, like, is being able to connect with an animal and become that animal and take on those gifts. And then I have another part in the first part, the third section of the first part. It talks about basic ways of how to develop our symbolic communication, how to start communicating with our animals, just general like aids. Because a lot of people ask me like, well, how do I do it? And I say, read my book. And I'll talk about that more, but there's just really practical and easy ways of doing that. And then the second part of the book, I discuss 76 different animals that I discuss, like, I give some background, their mythologies and indigenous traditions, what are some of the non-ordinary realms that they're associated with, and some messages that they may have for us. So that's the overview. And lots of love. Lots of love, lots of love.
What prompted your decision in choosing the animals that you decided to feature in the book?
So the animals, it was I think there was all the animals that I focus on, those were the animals that were most commonly discussed. They were discussed and they were discussed in so many different ways, because there was actually, a lot of people think, that plants were used as like, those were the most common forms of medicine, but it was actually a lot of like understandings with animals and working with animals that were used in a lot of recipes for healing. Like getting like just certain aspects, like a feather, or getting certain skin of an animal that would be used in recipes for, like, for example, like a dove, like a feather of a dove or a part of a dove would heal people for jealousy. So there were, there's all these different, so I got that, like the healing aspect. And then I also got parts of it from mythologies. I talked about the different mythologies that they were in. I talked about the different traditions, what they were connected to, I got like the ones that were like the most talked about in all the codices, in all our books, and all our artwork, and our mythologies that we still know about. So I went through all those things. I'm like, those were the animals that came up. Those are the ones that came up. And yeah, and there were also like zoomorphic animals too, which I discussed too, but those aren't necessarily like distinct animals that we can say like, yeah, this is an animal.
In the Mesoamerican traditions, how cosmology, I guess, how do they view animals, and where are humans situated in the cosmology?
So, it really depends on the practitioner. It really does, because there were some Nawali, that's what they would call in Nahuatl. It's that were shapeshifters that, depending on their intentions, Some you could have what, and this is a more nuanced term of it. It's called an animal coessence. This is when you share a similar energy signature. So you can actually go and join with that animal and go into the body of the animal, right? And that was the understanding that there was this beautiful deep connection. And when there was that joining, that both of you got soul energy and expanded soul energy, right? Or if you worked with that animal, there was an expansion of tonali soul energy. So you felt more revitalized, you felt more awake, you had more vigor. So that was, depending on if you worked with that animal coessence. But then there were some where, they can send animals to you to do their bidding. They could go and spy on you, or they could just kind of check on you. So, and and they were also very well respected too, because there were rulers that took on the names of animals too, because they were understood as having very, like, it's like an understanding of energy. Just like ancestors have energy, animals have energy. So certain animals had very like courageous energy. Like there was jaguars, of course, were like one of the most valued energy. So they would name themselves after the jaguar. Balam, that's the Yucatec Mayan term. It was a big thing. It's because it was like saying that they had the energy of the jaguar. So it was like a viewing of, they were looking at the animal, understanding the energy dynamics of that animal. It wasn't necessarily like a hierarchical system, like in that way. It wasn't just that. It was like understanding what is the energy of that animal, what are the gifts of that animal, and do they want to expand it? Do they want to share? Do they respect it? And there were also animals that they were respected very much so too. So it was different. It was different on what the intention. So you can think of it more as an energy dynamic, like understanding, like, okay, what kind of energy does this animal have? It was more like that.
I see. So for people today, I know this is a question that I'm sure you get asked a lot. What are ways to develop our connections with animal spirit guides?
So I think one of the things too there's so many ways is keep it simple, right? And people can become, they can do all kinds of ceremonies and beautiful things like that. But pay attention, because sometimes animals court us, and I'll give an example. January, like I think it was like the 3rd of January, that somewhere, it's early January of this year. I wrote an Instagram post that like, oh, like who's your animal coming forward for this year? Who wants to work with you? Who's your spirit guide? And immediately after I wrote that post, I went to get my trash, took out my trash, and there was a bee flying right in front of me, like flying, and it was like making itself known. And I was just like, oh, do you want to be my animal guide? And I got like a yes. And then right after that, I had, a little after that, I had a session. My first session of the day, I had a bee on my window screen, but buzzing really, really like. So right after that, after my session, I put a little animal gift that one of my clients gave me. It was a little, just like a little figurine of a bee, and then a little button of a bee, and I put it on my ancestor altar, along there to like, garner that energy of that. So it's also like just paying attention to like what they're doing, because animals court us, and we can also court animals as well. And some ways that we can court them, and I kind of just suggested that too, is by, sometimes we'll get gifts from friends, or we see something, whether it's a little, a little animal, like it's a stuffed animal or a ceramic animal, or, a picture of an animal, or something that has beads of an animal, something that represents that animal, and we put it on our altar, in one of our altars. And animals are so intuitive. So intuitive. When we start doing that, they'll start coming around. I remember I put my first hummingbird feather on my altar, and then the next thing I know, that day I got like a swarm of hummingbirds, like just flying outside my window, like, hi. So there's that, like, honoring that and paying attention to it. Another thing too is, writing a story about them, or writing, singing with them. I remember one night I I was writing, it was during my grad school, and I was kind of going ballistic, like just kind of crazy, like studying all night. And I was running around and I was singing a song about crows. It's like crows, crows, crows. And then the next day, I went hiking. And then at the very beginning of my hike, there was this beautiful crow feather, like right at my feet. Like they liked the song that I was singing for them. I was just like, oh, like thank you. You know, just so, I mean, animals are just so intuitive. So intuitive. It's just they like to be acknowledged. You know, when we pass them, we say hi, good morning, you know, or good evening. You know, we acknowledge them. We see a squirrel, hi, how are you? Good morning, you know, have a beautiful day. You know, like it doesn't have to be complicated. It's like just showing them common courtesy and respect. You know, that's it. That's some of the things. And of course, too, like when we get like dreams, like you'd also do dream work too. We can, you know, before we go to sleep, we can just like set an intention that we're gonna, if there's a certain animal we want to work with, we ask them that we're gonna bring them into our dreams, and that we're gonna remember that dream. We do a what's known as dream incubation, or setting an intention for dream, and we just set that intention. We just allow ourselves just to go to sleep as we're saying, you know, like a little mantra that we're gonna remember our dreams, and maybe it's a macabre that we'd like to connect with. I'm gonna connect, and they're gonna give me a message, and then the next day, you know, we start like writing down something. We start remembering anything like immediately. We journal bullet points of what that dream was, and we read through those bullet points, and we tune into what gives us an energy surge. You know, like what kind of like something, you know, like oh, like we read like, oh, okay, the macaw had a message for me, or macaw's opening a pathway for me, or you know, we just something that we feel it could be, and then we read the different associations, and we see what gives us an energy surge. And I talk about all these things in my book too. You know, I go through it, like how to do it, like how to tune into it, and see what feels like, oh, this is what it is. And then that night there'll be usually like, you know, something saying like just validation, like, yeah, that was right. Confirmation, that was right. You know, or sometime later that week or something will happen. So it's a lot of it is paying attention and being respectful and being courteous, and animals are they're grateful for that, you know, generally. You know, some animals they like to like, you know, they maybe want to be left alone a little bit. Maybe they've been kind of like, I don't know about you guys. So maybe you gotta like, you know, give them some kind of offering, you know, on your altar when you see them, or depending on how we work with them too. You know, if we're working with them energetically, then we do something, we leave it on our altar, we write about them. You know, if we're working them in the physical, then we leave it outside for them.
Would somebody, like, if you feel a resonance with a particular animal, would you then work with that animal, or would it be more like you feel like it's the cure for something that's missing in you, like you need more courage, or you need, or would it be both ways?
Definitely both ways. Definitely both ways. I mean, there's you know, it's interesting because crows are some of my favorites. You know, they're my favorite guys. I love them. They always have my back. They're always taking care of me. But then squirrels like sometimes they've been coming forward to me. And one time I had a squirrel come over and bring me an apple, like a little, it wasn't a full apple, but it was like, here you go, offering it to me. And I was like, oh, okay. And squirrels don't normally do that. So I mean, the squirrel was telling me, like, giving me medicine. And it was at a time where I needed a courage for something, courage to make a big decision. And it was at that time where I was kind of like questioning, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And shortly thereafter, I had a squirrel come over and bring me an apple, because squirrels are known to be very courageous in Mesoamerican traditions. So it was just like we're confirming, like, here's a medicine for you. Here's my medicine for you. You know, I'm gonna share my medicine for you with you. So it's definitely, you know, they're definitely our friends. And definitely it's like one, and another way too, connecting with them is like, along with paying attention, is reading about them. What are their natural traits? You know, what are they nocturnal? Are they diurnal? Because a lot of the times, especially when we have a soul energy connection with them, we share a lot of their similar traits. So we can learn a lot about ourselves that way too. And we can understand what our cycles are. And it's nice too, because then they feel like, oh, that's respectful, that's acknowledged. It's a nice way of acknowledging them. You know, like all of us, like it's nice when someone like looks us up, like a little bit, when it's done with good intention, of course, too, you know, and does a little like background, and it's like, oh, thank you, you know, it's just courteous and respectful, and like all of us, they like that.
As an example, perhaps, I resonate with deer.
Yes.
Is there like what would be some medicinal, some spiritual, some practices that are connected with the deer, just as an kind of example?
Well, the deer, especially with the Maya, in a lot of the artwork, especially the classic, during the classic period of the Maya, the deer was associated with death and rebirth. But it wasn't a complete rebirth, because what happened, it was a father that died, and they tried to bring him back, like rebirth him, like bring him back in some form, but instead the father came back as a deer. You know, so it was like it was a transformation, and it was, and then, you know, so there's an ability, like good, like deer understood as like being able to be like bring in, like they are very much aware, and they are bringing forward like some kind of like very just graceful transformation, because it wasn't difficult, it was a graceful transformation. And deer, in central Mexican traditions, which I talk about in the book too, is that they are thought of as loving nature. They are like, that's when they feel the most comfortable. But the only thing that the day sign that says that they can be like, one of the things that they have to be mindful of, those that are connected with deer, is to be mindful of fear and doubt, because that could get the best of them. You know, that they're going to be at their best, that they're going to be at their most free, and be able to transform when they are able to release any fear or doubt, because they can be timid in that way. It's good to be, it's said that it's good to be observant and assess, but to make sure that it doesn't get the best of people. You know, so that was like the deer medicine in that way. So it's just beautiful mythologies on that. It's an understandings that deer are very connected to being free, being very like like just very flowing, you know, and understanding and working with nature. They just have a natural, you must have I mean, if you feel very connected with deer, you must have like a natural ability to work with nature and be in tune with nature. That was something that, yeah.
Thank you. I had a question actually about for people that want to approach these traditions respectfully. Do you have thoughts on how to avoid things like cultural appropriation, colonized thinking?
Well, you know, I think that I feel that cultural appropriation, you know, if someone is approaching it with respect, in the sense that they're giving props, that they're saying this comes from this tradition, that they're taking because a lot of the times, you know, I'll talk to people about, and I'll give you an example of what could be potentially misappropriation. You know, when I start talking about the differences of Maya and Central Mexican, and then people will go, oh, but we're all the same. And it's like, okay, well, you chose to be all part of one melting pot. We're not. we're recognizing our nuances. We're recognizing all our beautiful, like, just diversity in that. So it's like taking the time of like just like researching it. And if you don't know, say you don't know. You know, I think that's the one thing. It's giving its roots, the history, giving these practices their roots, because they have been unrooted. They have been unrooted from where they came from. You know, and we don't know where things are at. We don't know, and that's why a lot of people don't feel comfortable connecting with their ancestors. You know, or a lot of these traditions, because they've been unrooted. So that's what I always intend in doing in my books, is like, these are the roots. These are the roots. these are the roots, and if you're not from this culture, that's okay, but these are the roots, and you can say, this is where it comes from. This is my tradition, and this is what the mythology says, and this is how to do it, rather than saying, this is not knowing what the person is talking about. Calling something from another tribe that's not there. You're just like bringing it into this big melting pot where people don't want to be a part of that. They want to recognize their beautiful nuances. I would say, because there's always going to be a learning and respect of cultures and traditions, and that's what makes this this world beautiful, when we can learn from each other, and grow from each other. And that's hopefully what it is when it's done with respect and with love, and we're willing to learn and share that learning.
Thank you. You and I had spoken before going live about possibly doing a practice or something, an experience. Do you feel like doing that?
Sure. Yeah, let's do this. So basically in this, so this is something that I'm, it's going to be a little bit, a little short, but I do want to preface with saying this too, that, and I interweave this in all of my books too, in terms of what is a portal, an access mundi, the sacred heart. This is again, an indigenous understanding that within the heart, and mountains, for example, had a heart. Certain places had a heart, and there were, in these world trees, in these access mundis, they were portals that could connect us into the non-ordinary realms. And interestingly enough, Gnostic traditions and a lot of more esoteric Christian traditions have an understanding of the Sacred Heart. But even like the Catholic traditions, and there are candles, we have the picture of Jesus with the flaming Sacred Heart, So it's an understanding that I'm going to take us through this journey of going within the Sacred Heart and opening up from our Sacred Heart, connecting to our animal guide. So it's going into different doors. The first door where we go into, it's seen as a sacred fire, and it's leaving all doubt behind in the violet fire, just putting all that, just anything that is less than love, putting that all in there. And then with the white fires, remembering that we're infinite, and then we're just going to all reach out and connect, ask to see, if an animal guide would like to work with us. Okay. So anybody who's watching, I'm going to ask everybody just to close their eyes. Okay. I'm going to join you too in this journey, of course. So I invite you to turn your attention and focus to the center of your chest, where your heart chakra is at. And please allow yourself to visualize a beautiful emerald light streaming out of the center of your chest. At the other side of that emerald light is a mirror reflection of you. It is a you that is always inspiring you to do healthy, loving, nourishing, nurturing things for you. It is a you that knows how truly magnificent you are. It is the you that is pure love and only love, the real you. And please feel into your energy as pure love, and allow yourself to open your heart to you more and more and more. And as you move your consciousness within El Sagrado Corazón, you realize that you are at the first doorway of the Sacred Heart, the doorway of the violet fires, the fires of alchemy, transfiguring divine love. Let these beautiful warm violet fires caress you love you, envelop you, and set the intention. And with this exhale, release into the violet fires any fears, doubts you are ready to let go of. Inhale, exhale, release. Inhale, exhale, release. Inhale, exhale, release. And you will remain in the violet fires, releasing. As within the Sacred Heart, we are our true selves, multidimensional. The next archway, doorway, always into the Sacred Heart is the archway, doorway of the resurrection fires. Let these cool, white fires purify you even deeper. Awaken within you dormant DNA. Awaken you to more of your infinite potential. And as you step within your sacred heart, you realize you are in a realm, an underworld realm. You are in a jungle on a beautiful full moon evening. And a jaguar, a balam, a beautiful jaguar is coming over to you. And with its bright yellow eyes, asks you intuitively, energetically, allow a light of love to shine out from the center of your chest. And through this light of love, call forth an animal guide that is most ideal for you in this now time in your life. And thank them for bringing you messages. And as the days and the weeks and the months unfold, please tune into how you would like them to bring you messages, whether it be while you're in a journey, meditating, in a dream, in the physical, synchronicities, and invite them to work with you, whether you know which animal it is or not. Just tune into how you would like them to bring you messages and develop symbolic communication. And we thank the wise spirits of the underworld, the jaguar, for joining us in this journey. And together, let's take 3 inhales and exhales. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Beautiful. Just very gently open your eyes. All right, that was a little mini journey.
Thank you. I won't say probably what it is, but I got a different animal than I would have expected completely. It's
Really?
an animal that normally would terrify me.
Really?
Huh.
A serpent?
Yeah. Should I say, or is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it.
It was like a cobra with like
Yeah.
with yeah.
I saw it. I saw it. I could see it. You just, yeah. I mean, if people are ready, like if able, like willing to share, like I could see it usually, like in journey work, like when I'm working with somebody or like I'm in their presence. And even though it's remote, I'm still in the presence with you. I can see energy feels around people too, and see it. So I saw that it was the serpent. That means that there's transformation for you, honey. There's some deep transformation going. Do you know if it was like a king cobra?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So there's it's time to shed things away too. That's what I'm getting. It's time to shed things away, to let go of things that are kind of weighing you down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe possibly.
Yeah.
Anything that you feel that there's just something to just like to step into you, to like really step up, and to claim you, because that's the king is yeah. The king.
Sounds about right. Well, I guess I should get to some audience questions here. We have a number coming in, and please keep writing them in to the Q&A. So Margaret asked if you have a particular animal guide.
I have a particular animal guide. Well, I mentioned the crow, and I've been working with the bee this year. I'm really open. I'm really open to who, and I love the hummingbirds. The hummingbirds always come around. The hummingbirds they usually give me confirmation of something. When I want confirmation of something. The crows, they're amazing. They're amazing. They always have my back. They always have my back. They always let me know. When I see one crow, I know that it's a message from God. When I say two crows, it's like, be aware, be discerning. And and then sometimes when I'm running, I'll see two crows, and I've had that happen where like two crows are flying over me, and a car's not paying attention, and they have me stop, and it's a good thing. And I have, they give me gifts like crow feathers, and I just love them so much. Yeah. And I have them also on my altar, and I have a little crow on my altar, and yeah.
They're very intelligent, apparently. They remember people, and
Oh yeah, they're very adaptable, very resourceful. Yeah. When they talk back to me, when I say good morning, they'll talk back. They'll also, them. Yeah.
thank you. So there's a question from Johanna. I don't know, I might mispronounce this. She asks, is a Nawal from one's birthday according to the Maya calendar the same as a spirit animal or animal guide, and how do we honor them?
Okay. So Nugal, like Nugal is it's, and there's different understandings of that too. Basically what was determined is that when someone was born, there was a bathing rite. And it was depending on, there was a day that they were born on the solar calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar, equivalent of that, but it's not like ours. It was different 13. Anyway, I'll just say it was like the solar calendar. And then there was what's known as the divinatory calendar. There was a Soikin with the Mayan, that's what it's called. Well, generally that's what it's called. And what happened is that on that day they would get a partera, they would get a midwife, and a curanderismo in that way. They'd get a few, and they would basically assess and divine, the day that they were born, per the divinatory calendar. Because it was like a combination of that, and they would look at it and they would assess that, and that was assessed from the divinatory calendar what was the soul energy, and if that wasn't, and now it's done too presently, because that bathing rite is no longer, it's not really done, not that I'm aware of, at least. Maybe it's done in another, maybe somewhere it's done somewhere, but at least in the way that it was done before, it's usually what's and it's depending on who you ask too, because a lot of different indigenous tribes, they have Totsil, they'll say, for example, that if you see an animal 3 times and it's something that like a life-changing event, like either if it's through a dream or if it's in the physical, that's usually a soul connection, because your tonali, your soul energy, something that's really like shaking, or something that's like soul, like shakes you to the core, and you see the animal, that's like an animal like connecting with you. And it's not necessarily just one animal, it's like that the species of that animal. And how you honor them, oh, there's just so many different ways, create their own altar, to have pictures of them, sing songs, bring offerings, and, dream about them, write about them, and they'll pick it up for sure.
So, for example, with my king cobra, would I do that same thing now that I've seen it, or that would be the...
Well, one of the things that you have to like, well, you don't have to, but what would be maybe recommendable, like I recommend is that you tune into like feeling comfortable, feeling comfortable with the king cobra. Because there's something that the king cobra is, because the king cobra in this sense is like coming, there's some underworld aspect there, like shadow aspect, that the king cobra is like having you look at.
Right.
That it's like, he's going to test you.
Yeah, for sure.
He's going to test you. So be prepared for that. It's not like something there. Sometimes like animals test us too. They have medicine for us in that way too.
When you were saying in the guided, you were saying like, how would you like them to come to you and like present? And I was like, just don't be too like pregnant. Just like, just be careful.
Yeah. So I mean, it's something, that's why I'm getting the sense of too, is like when you feel comfortable like working with them, like, then you start like slow, baby steps, and then they'll come like baby steps too. It's tuning into how you feel with that too, with the messages.
So we're getting close to time, so let's maybe do two questions like, kind of quickly to make sure we get as many as we can. So Valeria asks, how long do you normally work with an animal guide? Can there be multiple one at a time? I guess you do multiple at a time, it sounds like.
Yes. I definitely, uh, it sometimes it depends too. It depends on what's going on in our life. What's going on in our life in terms of like what, sometimes I need bear medicine. So it's nice to have bear medicine just to cuddle, and hibernate. Like it's winter time, so I turn into a little bear too. And I have bears all around me, and I work a lot with bears. So it depends on the season and what's going on and what we're doing. Because sometimes and that's like bear medicine, for example, is something that's very healing when we need to like be introspective, and hibernate and just be in our own energy. And then we work with a lot with bear energy. So it really depends on like what's going on in our life, and tuning into that, and then connecting with those animals that help us connect with that medicine.
Okay, we'll have time for one more. Val writes, I've always been connected to many birds, crow, eagle, blue heron, owl, lately to the bear for the last 20 years. I am 74. Now I find the wolf calling me. Is this usual?
Yeah, well, the wolf is very interesting. The wolf is, well, at least in Mesoamerican traditions, this of course this varies throughout. The wolf was understood like it was a loner, but at the same time there was a pack. It was in a pack. So it could be something that like the wolf is like asking you to like, that there's it could be, I get the sense, I don't know, and I get the sense for some reason that the wolf is like asking you like to explore what it is to be on your own, like in a different kind of way, to go and explore and to call out, and that there's some exploring that needs to be done, some exploration that needs to be done. Yeah.
That's really powerful. So I know many people are writing in speaking about the animals that they connected with. If they want to connect with you more, they can find you at realizeyourbliss.com.
Yes. And I'm also very much active in IG too, which is ERIKA dot Buenaflor, BUENAFLOR, and then underscore curandera.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this wisdom and really fascinating history and knowledge about animal medicine and Mesoamerican Curanderismo traditions. I'd like to remind everybody that the book, Animal Medicine, a Curanderismo Guide to Shapeshifting, Journeying, and Connecting with Animal Allies is available from Banyen. You can go to banyen.com, banyen.com. And on behalf of Banyen Books, thank you all for coming out today, and thank you, Erica Buenaflor.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.